Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And I want to just especially welcome Ken, who has picked a very challenging parsha to have to deal with, and you're probably gonna bristle all over, Ken. It's not easy. Okay, so let's get into the screen share. I did look at, let's see where we are. Here we are. I did take a moment to look at what Torah Tmima had to say about this. And I hope what I have to share with you and what he has to share is a little bit helpful. All right.
Sure.
You might want to mute. All right. So we were reading this basic law here, which is if a man beats his servant or his maidservant with a rod. So they're going to analyze this very carefully and be very specific about what this is, right? Umeit tachat yado, and this person dies, their servant dies while he's beating him or her. Nakom yinakem, he shall be avenged, right? That is the servant, the slave. We're talking about a slave here, will be avenged. But there's an ach, and the ach is a diminution. In other words, it lessens what's just said right now. It means but. However, im yom or yomayim, if a day or 2 days ya'amod, he stands, right? He's still standing. He hasn't died. Lo yukam, he will not be avenged, meaning the master will not face capital punishment. Understand the sort of basic system under which we're operating here, just for the sake of understanding the concepts, not necessarily applying them, but just trying to understand them. So we have a system of capital punishment. The system accepts the notion of capital punishment, and is trying to, and it also understands that they're dealing with a society that practices slavery, that does in fact, under certain circumstances, practice slavery. If I were to try and stop any bristling on this kind of stuff, I realize it's counterintuitive to the way we think. I include myself there. Nevertheless, they are dealing with a society that does, and we can't just walk away from it. We have to try and modify it as best as we can and see how do you try and I believe eventually get people to stop doing that. Anyway, but here we are dealing with a society that accepts slavery. Ki kaspohu, for he is his property. The slave is his property. And what we see in the rabbinic interpretations is limiting the general application of this law as much as possible. And at least within the Rashi, you're going to see already how this is working, okay? So let's take a look. I don't know that we got into a lot of discussion because this is so difficult. All right. So first of all, just to summarize what I believe we did read, is that this law is limited to a category of slavery called Eved Knaani, a Canaanite slave. So exactly how one defines that is not so easy. On the one hand, it definitely means a non-Israelite. We're not talking about a slave of someone who's an Israelite slave, and who has and of course, these laws apply to Israelite masters. Okay, so we're totally cutting out that category. And when we talk about a Canaanite slave, are we limiting it to the 7 Canaanite nations that the Israelites went into to capture the land of Israel? Or are we talking about, when we talk about Canaanite slaves, are we talking about simply any non-Israelite? And the fact that it says Canaanite makes me want to limit it strictly to somebody who's from these 7 Canaanite nations and no one else. But I would have to do further research and see how the rabbis define that term. All right. So this is the one that, other than that, if someone murders someone else, or if somebody strikes someone else with an intent, there has to be intent as well. I guess it's called mens rea, fully cognizant of what they're doing. Otherwise, this would obviously be and this is a sort of a difficult case, because on the one hand, does he intend, it's not an accident, he's intentionally beating this person, but on the other hand, does he intend to kill him? Is there an intent to kill this person? And I think the assumption is that he is not intending to kill. So it falls into a kind of unusual situation that on the one hand, it's not accidental, okay, because there's an intentionality in the act itself of beating, but the intention is to punish, not to kill. And so that throws it into a little bit of a more complicated situation. Anyway, here's something I don't think we read, okay? We explained that a day or two means a full 24 hours. So in other words, if the slave died before the 24 hours were up, that would be considered an intentional, right? An intentional act. All right. So, b'shevet, with a rod. So here we go. This is how we understand this term shevet. Kesheyesh bo kadei lahamit, meaning he has to be beating him with an instrument that is capable of killing him. It has to be that. HaKatuv medaber. Scripture is speaking about that. All right. So, in other words, it becomes manslaughter. It doesn't become murder one unless he is using something. And the idea is that he absolutely could kill him with a rod. A rod is capable of killing someone. But it has to be, if it's something, that's part of how we're understanding and limiting and dissecting this law. Or does this law apply even if he is beating him with something that isn't capable of killing him? So we derive from that, by the way, that this would not be considered murder one. That's the point. Talmud Lomar, for this reason, Scripture speaks regarding an Israelite, right? An Israelite here, the im even yad or asher yamut ba, that in order for it to be, in this case, murder and intentional, it has to, the part of that intentionality is established by the fact that he's using something like a stone, right, with which a person can be killed. It does go on. We did read this, but I don't know that we really explained it as I'm trying to do now. There's another version that says, that's perhaps a little closer to what we're doing here, which says a vessel of wood, right? Eitz yad, something that he, with a handle, a wooden handle or something like that, with which he will be killed. All right. Ikahu, he had to strike him with something like that. And so if with regards to an Israelite, okay, in order for it to be considered murder, it has to have, there has to be sufficient intentionality with the instrument he used to beat him. V'halod varim kal v'chomer. So we go even on the other extreme, Uma Yisrael Chamur, that when we're talking about beating a fellow Israelite, that is considered a heavier case, Ein Chayav Alav. So in such a case, unless the Israelite who's beating the other Israelite is using an instrument that can kill someone, that person is not, it's automatically not murder one, it becomes manslaughter. So likewise, we're saying here that the master, unless he's got something with, unless he's beating the slave with something that would kill him, it's also considered manslaughter. It's only if he actually hit him beat him with something that is capable of killing him. But al-aver, and not only that, al-aver, and regarding and beating a limb of this person, he's smacking a limb of this person, shehu kadei lamut, bahaka azu, in which he could die with this particular beating. So I believe this is one or the other. In other words, if he isn't beating him with an instrument that can kill someone, but is in fact beating him on a part of his body where he could die, that's also, okay? Kal lo kol shekain. So all these laws apply definitely to a case of an Israelite who is beating a Canaanite slave. Nakom Yanakem, we did discuss this. This they understand simply there's on the basis of scriptural verses that the death penalty for this is with a sword. In other words, decapitation, something like that. So let's go on now to this next verse, which says, Ach im yom yomayim, etc. Unless if he lives a day or 2 days, he will not be avenged, for he is his property. Okay, so let's take a look at the Rashi here. This, of course, this is all, bristling stuff, but let's just hold off. Okay. Ach im yom o yomayim ya'amod lo yukam. So he's taking this entire part of the verse, right? If he stands or he remains alive for a day or 2, he shall not be avenged. It's not considered murder. Im al yom echad hu patur. If the assailant is held innocent, right? I should not say innocent, but innocent of murder. He is considered innocent of murder if the man remains alive for 1 day. Al yomayim lo kol shekain. Well, then if he remains alive for 2 days, wouldn't we say he's innocent? So why does it say both? Elayom shehu kayomayim. So what this really means is a day which is like 2 days. The ezo zeh, and how do we define such a day which is like 2 days? Me'et la'et. It means 24 hours. So a minimum of 20. If it's less than 24 hours, then it's considered murder 1. Okay. Low, if all the other, if the other conditions are there too. Here we go into this difficult verse. Lo yukam, he will not be avenged. The slave will not be avenged. Ki kaspohu, for he is his property. Okay, he's the property of the master. So what did they design? Because it says he is his property, he will not be avenged. If someone else beats this Canaanite slave, despite the fact that the servant remained alive for 24 hours kodem shemet, before expiring, chayav, such a person is considered guilty of murder 1. If you can show that the death occurred as a result of the beating, and again, the other considerations have to be taken into account. That is, that he used an instrument, that was capable of killing, and also that he struck him in a place where he could have died. Then it's considered murder 1. So this is limiting the way they're understanding this kaspohu, for he is his property, is that this law of this 24-hour this 24-hour period applies strictly to this particular case. So we can see, yeah, go ahead, please.
Rabbi, don't they have to have 2 witnesses before guilty?
Yes, that's all got to be there. That all has to be there. But again, I mean, we try to protect even the people who are accused to make sure that they get as fair that we want justice and fair a trial as possible. So, okay. So, yeah, Golda.
So it behooves, and it is incumbent upon the striker to make sure that the strikee survives over 24 hours.
Correct. And
so getting a doctor or whatever, or trying to heal wounds or something like that.
Well, he's guilty of that for sure. Okay, I mean, he's considered responsible. We already dealt with the whole situation of some of injury.
So yeah, but it's a little sneaky.
No, I don't
He's
think
not just leaving him alone. I know that they're supposed to take care of him,
okay,
and he
remember,
hopes he survives. You want to
well,
hope your property
well,
survives.
well, you want that, but not only
Right,
that, it doesn't mean he walks away. It doesn't mean he
right,
walks away. Okay,
right,
simply means he is not. The charge is dropped from murder one to manslaughter.
right.
Okay, I mean, I don't believe, I could be wrong about this. I believe that they're strictly talking about whether this is considered a murder case.
Right.
Okay.
Gotcha. And
Yeah,
if he's doing everything he can to keep this person alive,
yeah,
it's not
right.
doesn't look bad. Let's put
Yeah,
it this way. It
right.
doesn't look bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see what I want to do. Okay. Uh, this particular Torah Tamima here that I'm pointing out, to summarize it, is simply when it says his servant, right, his slave, is the explanation of why it just means Canaanite slave. And I don't know that that's necessarily as an issue. Okay, here we go. Beshavet, with a rod. Okay. Yir'eli shehamake et avado v'sakin v'sayif. Okay. I think what this is saying is, what if I see that the one who is beating his servant is using a knife or a sword, or be'evan, or with a stone, ve'egrof, and his fist, ukayatse bahem, and similar kinds of instruments. Va'amduhu lemita, and the court established, they evaluated the situation, and they evaluated the assailant for as a capital offense. Va'met, and he dies, and the servant dies eventually, because what he's going to say is a no bedin yom or yomayim. So he's saying very explicitly that this law of 24 hours, right, that the charge is dropped to manslaughter, assuming I'm right about that. It's no longer, one thing we know for sure is he's no longer up on murder one, okay, that doesn't apply here. In other words, it's murder. If this, so he's spelling out what we were reading in the Rashi of saying, that it has to be this law of 24-hour grace period, if you want to call it that, only applies if he is not using an instrument of death of some kind, capable of killing a person. Ela afilu meit la'achar shana. Look at how he goes here. But even if he dies after a year, right? Even if he survives a year, neherag alav. Literally, it's saying the assailant is punished with death, faces the death penalty for having killed him. He is considered having killed him. The issue is that it's still considered murder. Okay, whether the punishment is actually death or not, it's considered murder one. Lachach ne'emar b'shevet, and for this reason, the Torah states with a rod, mipnei shelo nitna rishut lahakoto, okay, because he does not have permission to beat him, ela b'shevet v'ritzuah, except with a rod or a strap, ukayatse bahem, and similar things, v'lo b'haka'a retzicha, and he's not permitted to beat him with a murderous beating, okay? And this is actually not from the Talmud. It is from Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, chapter 2, and I'm looking to say, from the Yad HaChalazaka. It's another term for the Mishnah Torah, and Merotzeach. He has laws of murder. So, okay. And I realize we're bristling at the fact that he can beat him with a stick and a strap. But the idea of saying that the reason why this law applies and the Torah said with a stick, is because they don't consider a stick. If I said that it was something, no, it's not something that is capable of killing him. It has to be such that you don't use a stick to kill someone. Okay, that's clarifying that. Now, here is the footnote here, and we need to look at this. All right. And I'm not saying this is easy stuff. When I say not easy, I mean not so much trying to understand the logic. I mean, understanding it within our own social framework. So, kavanato baha. The intention of this statement is denitna haTorah reshut lahakoto b'shevet, that the Torah has given him permission to beat him with a stick. Okay. Hu mishum, and the reason why the Torah allows him to beat his slave, dematzinu, because we find the gam of Rasha. We're just going to get deeper and deeper into the mud here. You're going to see, right, that even a father is given permission, lahakot et beno, to strike his son. So they accept corporal punishment. Corporal punishment is something that, at least within the framework of the Torah here and in this society, is something acceptable. So there are a bunch of things that represent a societal change or a societal difference between where the Torah is coming from and where we are today. Okay, kedei liyasro, in order to punish him, that corporal punishment is permissible. I'm old enough to know that I experienced corporal punishment myself, never from my parents, but at school. When I went to public school in South Africa, they would smack you with a cane. And I on a couple of occasions actually received corporal punishment. I know, for example, I think in Singapore they practice it legally there. Okay, and he says ukedichtiv, and this represents what is written Mishle Yod Gimel in Proverbs 13, chapter 13, and I think the word is chosech shivto, one who withholds his rod, soneh bno, hates his son. Okay, and I would tell you that I do not interpret that verse in Proverbs literally. My understanding is that if you don't correct your children, and maybe even punish them, not necessarily corporeally, but that it is so important to train children, and that if you do not punish them for their misbehaviors, you are looking ultimately for major problems. Now, I realize that's a topic of a seminar, but at least this is from the Torah's point of view. And I think that probably there's some good arguments about the need to hold your children accountable and to train them. And of course, it depends on the child, and there are always circumstances, right, alter cases, but you have to see what you can do. By the way, let me say this, that I think there are also statements that talk about, at least if not in the Torah or the Bible, certainly within rabbinic tradition, that you don't want to abuse this privilege, if you want to call it a privilege. And I can tell you that there were boys when I was growing up in school who had received what we used to call them was cuts. That's what they were called, which was the smacking. There was a limit to how much, but at any rate, basically, the fear of it was greater than the actual application of it, I can tell you. And these people had received it often enough that, frankly, it was no longer really very effective. So,
my principal had a paddle in her office.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so young, but no. But no, what else I was noticing is, remember that the Torah, whatever it teaches us to do, other people are doing worse.
Correct.
Or the opposite, all the way out there. It's like, yes. If you must do this, this is how to do this.
Right. I agree.
In a civilized sort of way.
Right. But whether or not children growing up are happier these days because we have moved away so much. I mean, my feeling was that the problem with corporal punishment and the actual physical punishment actually trains a person to use physical force to
Yeah.
get away. And I think in
And
general,
it's a tough cycle to break.
it is a tough cycle to break. So he mentions another verse in Proverbs chapter 23, Beshevet Chancho. It says, with the rod, train him. Okay. But this is where it gets interesting. And this is one of the reasons why you want to be careful about jumping to conclusions and jumping to judgment about what we're reading, especially when this stuff makes us bristle. Okay. Klal drashazo, he says, but this general interpretation, tsarich iyun ktsat, we need to look deeper into this a little bit. Because it's clear in the Mechilta. The Mechilta, of course, is this midrashic, halachic midrash on the book of Exodus. That the reason why they are using this term rod, right? We have said that the reason that the Torah uses the word rod has to do with the actual instrument, and to clarify that it has to be something that is considered generally incapable of killing someone. And that's why the Torah used this word. And he's saying, actually, this is a rabbinic interpretation, right? That's why the Torah used the word shevet, rod. And he says, no, there's another rabbinic interpretation that says that we need the word rod for a different purpose. The gzera shava, we need the word rod and that the reason why the Torah is using the word rod is for a purpose of interpretation, the shevet, okay, because this word shevet occurs in another verse, and we want to be able to learn. The gzera shava is a method, a logical method, where if you see a word in one context, and in some ways it's pleonastic, meaning did we really need this particular word, and we see this particular word in another context, that we can take one context and apply it to the other context and vice versa. That's a gzera shava. Okay. Dichtiv, because it states b'ma'asarot, when you're tithing your animals, it says kol asher ya'avor tachat ha-shevet. It refers to anything that passes under the rod. So you can see here we're talking about a whole different context. We're talking about the 10th, counting your 10th animal, right? And that basically, I imagine they use the rod as a way of not to beat the animal, but rather just to count the animals. And we're saying, and again, why dafka the Torah had to specify shevet? So we're saying the Torah specifies shevet in this context, and uses shevet in this other context, so you can learn from one context to the other. So here we go. So what are we learning? Ma haka, ma hacha, I think, lahotzi shel shotfim. The reason why is to learn something that if in fact this servant is owned by two people, right? By partners. Okay, darshinan, as we will explain the pasuk haba in the next verse, ki kaspohu, for he is his property, af b'ma'asarot, and also when we talk about tithes, okay, this particular law of tithing, lahotzi shel shotfin, means these animals don't belong to partners. Ve'yesh liyashev, and he says, he doesn't do it here. He says there's a way of understanding this particular idea. In other words, of these two differing ways of understanding the word shevet, the purpose of the word shevet in the verse. So basically, and I know we need to stop here, but the reason why it says shevet is that if two people own the slave, if they are partners in the slave, because it is not the property of one of them, this exceptional case of 24 hours doesn't apply. Just like the law of tithing back there doesn't apply in that particular case if the animals are owned by partners. Likewise, this application, this exceptional situation of 24 hours does not apply. And that, when it said it is his property, right, we took it and sort of, oh, it's property, and got into that. In fact, what we're saying is the emphasis is his. In other words, so this particular law. So you can see that there's a whole can of worms here that we're just starting to begin to understand as far as what these verses are really coming to teach us, etc. And I'm going to stop the share here and take a moment in case any of you have a question. And I hope that my explanations were reasonably clear and that you could follow what we're talking about. Any comments before I stop the recording?
I was wondering if they have a sedron, a court in those days, where if a man becomes bankrupt, can he go to that court and plead for his life or something like that? I mean, a man that owes money or a debt naturally will have to serve his master, the one he owes a debt to. I understand that,
Not
but
not necessarily, Harlan. The court was empowered to sell him, but it was really selling his services, okay, in order to pay the debt. The court would reimburse. This is my understanding, okay, that the person wasn't necessarily sold to the person he owed the money to, but the court, but there was a market for this kind of thing, and so the court could sell his services to someone else, and he was a servant, okay, if he was guilty of something and owed some money and could not pay it physically, and or didn't have family who might take care of it for him, etc., etc. So again, you're raising subjects which are major areas of Jewish law. But yeah, there were ways in which to deal with bankruptcy, and of course, that there was a remission of debts every 7 years.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I think it has to do with the 7 years laws. I know we've read it. I know we've gone over it, so it must be in that section.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
but
We're coming up to again.
It's different with women. You don't have the 7 years with women. I think the only time they can be free is probably in the Jubilee or when the master dies. I don't understand.
No, I wouldn't start that. I think there's a lot of clarification required there. You're right. I mean, women were treated differently, but as to whether or not a woman was sold, for her theft or something like that, again, I would hesitate to speak definitively without doing all the research necessary. One thing I do know is that the court was very limited in its ability to do that kind of thing. All right. In other words, and so I'm going to stop because we're past time. But what I want you to get out of today's lesson, if you get anything out of today's lesson, is the way in which the rabbis and the commentators look so carefully at this to try and establish an equitable way in which to understand the Torah's verses. And so when we approach the Torah's verses, you can sort of strike back and bristle and all that. And on the other hand, if you're patient, you can start to understand what's really being communicated slowly. All right, I'm going to stop here and thank you.